In today's fast-paced, always-on world, we treat sleep as something to be managed, optimized, or even conquered. We chase the perfect mattress, count hours obsessively, and swallow supplements to shut our minds off. But long before the modern world turned night into day, people embraced a different kind of sleep. A rhythmic, peaceful, and purposeful pattern that modern science is only now beginning to understand. It's called segmented sleep, and it's one of the most forgotten yet fascinating aspects of human history. Let's rewind the clock to the 18th and 19th centuries. Before the invention of the light bulb, nightfall truly meant darkness. There were no glowing streetlights outside your window, no phones to scroll through under your blanket. When the sun went down, so did the tempo of life. People relied on oil lamps and candles, which were expensive and dim. For most, the day ended with the setting sun, and night became a natural boundary, an invitation to rest, to reset. But sleep didn't come in a single uninterrupted block. It came in two distinct parts, often referred to in old diaries, medical journals, and literature as first sleep and second sleep. People would go to bed a couple of hours after dusk, around 8 or 9 p.m. They'd sleep deeply for 3 to 4 hours. Then, like clockwork, they would wake up, not because something was wrong, but because that was simply how the body worked. This wakeful period, which typically lasted an hour or two, was calm and conscious. People didn't jump into action or panic about being awake. Instead, they used the time with intention. Some prayed or meditated. Others got up to stoke the fire, check on livestock, or spend quiet time with their spouse. Many people read the Bible, wrote in journals, or simply reflected in silence. It was seen as a peaceful window in the night, a time when the mind was still, the world was quiet, and the soul could speak. After this midnight interlude, they would return to bed and enter their second sleep, waking up naturally around sunrise, and they didn't feel tired. They felt rested, perhaps even more than most of us do after our so-called full night of sleep. What's remarkable is how common and universal this pattern was. Historical records from all across Europe and North America mention segmented sleep casually, as if everyone did it. And they did. Medical texts from the time even advised patients on what to do during the waking, offering suggestions like reading scripture or going for a short walk in the moonlight. It was not a disorder, it was normal, but as technology advanced, everything changed. The 19th century saw the rise of gas lamps and eventually electric lighting. Cities that were once dark and still at night became illuminated and active. Nightlife began, work hours extended, entertainment moved indoors and online. The natural cues that told the body it was time to rest were slowly drowned out by a flood of artificial light. By the early 20th century, the idea of 8 hours of uninterrupted sleep became the new standard. It wasn't based on biology, it was based on efficiency. Industrial societies needed workers who could function on a tight, predictable schedule. Sleep was no longer a rhythm. It became a commodity, something to be consumed quickly so people could return to producing, buying, and doing. But the body never forgot. Even today, many people find themselves waking in the middle of the night, often around 2 or 3 a.m. They worry, assuming something is wrong. But in reality, their body may just be remembering a pattern that's thousands of years old. A pattern built into our DNA. A rhythm that served us well when we were more in tune with nature and with ourselves. So what's the lesson here? It's that rest isn't just about sleep, it's about surrendering to a natural flow. It's about letting go of the pressure to be productive every moment of the day and learning to trust the signals of your own body. The people of the past didn't sleep less than us. They slept differently, more peacefully, and perhaps more meaningfully. They lived in a slower world, yes. But maybe that slowness wasn't a weakness. Maybe it was wisdom. And maybe today, in a world buzzing with noise and neon, we could learn something from their forgotten rhythm, something we desperately need to remember. Before the hum of power lines, before digital clocks blinked in bedrooms, before streetlights pierced the night sky, there were villages where no one ever fully slept. Not because of insomnia, fear, or trouble, but because they lived in a world that required community responsibility, where sleep was shared in shifts like bread or firewood. In rural villages across Europe, Asia, and even parts of colonial America before the spread of electric lighting, life moved with the sun, but safety, survival, and communal needs moved with the people. And that often meant that someone had to stay awake always. This was especially true in tight-knit agrarian societies where homes were thatched, streets were narrow, and wood fires crackled in every dwelling. A stray spark could become a catastrophe. A sick child could need water. A barn could be raided by wolves, or worse, thieves. And so, families and neighbors devised a system that was equal parts practical and protective: sleep in shifts. They didn't call it night watch like the military would. It wasn't formal and there were no uniforms. It was simply life. Mothers would go to bed after putting the youngest children to sleep, while fathers stayed up a few hours longer tending to the fire or finishing repairs. Then the early risers, grandfathers or adolescent boys, would wake in the darkest part of the night to check the fences, stir the embers, or walk the borders of the village. Some would take lanterns and make quiet rounds, making sure all was well. These were the unofficial guardians of sleep. This routine wasn't about paranoia, it was about duty and rhythm. Every member of the village contributed in some way. Children learned early that the night wasn't always silent, and they were comforted by the gentle murmur of footsteps outside or the soft creak of a neighbor's door opening. It meant they were being watched over. They were never alone in the dark. In some colder climates, families would rotate sleep near the central fire. The eldest slept closest, protected by warmth. The younger or more alert slept further out, ready to stoke the flames. If the fire died, warmth died with it. And in harsh winters, so could people. Shifts of sleep weren't just convenience. They were a matter of life and death. Imagine a village with no electricity. Nights stretch longer in the winter. Wolves cry in the distance, the wind howls like a warning, but inside the humble wooden homes, candles glow dimly. A mother rocks her child. A young man sits with his boots on, sharpening tools by the firelight. He'll sleep later after he's made sure his neighbors are safe. That was the world before the light bulb, a world of trust, interdependence, and a shared sense of responsibility. They understood something we've largely forgotten, that rest wasn't just personal, it was communal. For one to sleep deeply, another had to stay awake. Today we prize independence. We close our bedroom doors. We wear noise, canceling earbuds. We schedule our sleep with alarms, apps, and routines. But perhaps in that pursuit of individual rest, we've lost something collective, something spiritual. The people in those pre-electric villages may have gotten less consecutive sleep, but what they got in return was peace of mind. They knew someone else had their back, that someone was always listening, always watching, always present. It was a rhythm that bred connection, not isolation. This way of life, of sleeping in turns, isn't just a romantic image of the past. It teaches us a valuable lesson today. That community care isn't a luxury, it's a foundation. When we take turns holding space for others, when we stay awake, while others rest, physically, emotionally, spiritually, we build something rare, a culture of safety rooted in love and trust. So maybe the next time you find yourself awake in the still of the night, instead of frustration, feel the echo of that old rhythm. Maybe your wakefulness isn't a problem, but a participation in something ancient. A silent keeping of the watch, because long ago, in firelit homes and frost-covered villages, someone sat awake while the world slept, not for themselves, but for all. And in doing so, they kept more than just the night. They kept each other. When electricity arrived in the early 20th century, it was hailed as humanity's greatest leap forward. Lights flickered on in homes, factories extended their working hours, and cities sparkled into the night like stars fallen to earth. But behind the applause, something ancient and sacred quietly slipped away, our connection to natural rest. For thousands of years, human sleep followed the rhythm of the sun. Our ancestors rose with dawn and retired shortly after dusk. Their bodies, guided by the changing hues of twilight and the dark velvet of night, knew when it was time to slow down, when to restore, when to dream. This wasn't just a habit, it was a biological harmony. But when the electric bulb entered the home, everything changed. Suddenly, night didn't mean darkness. Dusk no longer signaled rest. Sleep once dictated by nature, now bowed to convenience, and while electricity illuminated our rooms, it began to dim something within us. In villages that had once slept in shifts, homes were now lit until midnight or later. People worked longer, ate later, and stayed awake well past what their ancestors would consider sane. The body's circadian rhythm, a complex system tied to the cycle of light and dark, began to fracture. Melatonin, in the sleep hormone, stopped releasing at its natural time. People felt alert when they should feel tired. We didn't extend our waking hours. We stole them from our rest. At first, this seemed harmless. More light meant more productivity. Right, factories buzzed 24 hours a day. Office buildings glowed deep into the night. Coffee became a cultural crutch. Sleep, once a sacred act of restoration, was reduced to a biological inconvenience. Something to be managed, not respected, but the cracks started to show. Insomnia rates began to rise. People complained of racing thoughts, unexplained fatigue, irritability, and anxiety. We invented alarm clocks to rip us from shallow sleep. We laughed about how little we slept, as if exhaustion were a badge of honor. But the body doesn't forget what it was built for. You can cheat nature, but not without paying a price. Children who once slept deeply now fell asleep to the glow of screens. Adults who once shared stories by candlelight now scrolled through endless feeds, their minds overstimulated. Relationships suffered, mental health declined, and the irony, despite being more connected and more awake than ever before, we felt more alone. Electricity gave us light, but it took our stillness. It gave us options, but robbed us of rhythm, and most tragically, it trained us to ignore the soft, ancient voice inside that whispered, "It's time to rest now." This isn't a rejection of progress. Electricity has transformed our world in extraordinary ways, saving lives, powering education, connecting continents. But like all gifts of power, it came with a warning label we ignored. What you gain in efficiency, you may lose in peace. In cultures that still live without widespread electricity, remote tribes, rural mountain villages, nomadic communities, studies show that people sleep more naturally. They fall asleep earlier, often wake for an hour in the middle of the night, a phenomenon once considered normal, and then return to sleep peacefully. Their dreams are richer, their stress is lower. Their lives are slower, but also more attuned. What if the death of natural rest wasn't just about sleep? What if it was about how we live? To rest naturally is to live in alignment. It's to say, I am not a machine. I do not run on artificial light and endless input. I have limits, and those limits are beautiful. Rest reminds us that we are human, not just productive units in a world that never powers down. So how do we reclaim it? We start small, we dim the lights earlier, we honor the sunset, we shut off the noise, we listen to our yawns instead of ignoring them, we make peace with the dark, we remember that the world kept turning just fine before the bulb, and perhaps so did we. Because when electricity entered the home, it changed everything, but it's not too late to flip the switch in our own lives and light a different kind of path, not brighter but quieter and more true. Long before modern medicine began to study sleep as a science, ancient people treated it as sacred. Sleep wasn't just rest, it was restoration, revelation, and reconnection with the rhythms of the universe. For centuries, our ancestors lived by instinct, guided by the sun and moon, seasons, silence, and the inner pull to slow down after dark. And then we forgot. We forgot that the human body is a biological clock. We forgot that light is not just illumination, it's information. We forgot that the darkness is not a void to fear, but a healing space designed to nurture the mind and body. The invention of electricity, followed by screens, 24-hour work cycles, and endless entertainment, gave us power over the night. But at what cost? The science of sleep is only now beginning to uncover what our ancestors already knew deep in their bones. Sleep is not optional. It is not laziness, it is not a luxury. It is the foundation of health, resilience, memory, creativity, and emotional balance. The cost of ignoring this truth has been steep. Today, sleep deprivation has been linked to almost every major health crisis: heart disease, obesity, depression, anxiety, diabetes, even Alzheimer's. the World Health Organization has classified shift work as a probable carcinogen. Lack of sleep impairs judgment as severely as alcohol. Teenagers whose developing brains desperately need rest are now among the most sleep-deprived age groups in the world, and yet we push on. Coffee replaces sleep. Hustle replaces balance. We wear our exhaustion like a badge. We joke about sleeping when we're dead. But this isn't bravery, it's biological rebellion, and slowly it's killing us. But here's the good news, science is catching up to wisdom. In the last 2 decades, sleep science has surged. Researchers have mapped the brain's sleep cycles, REM, deep sleep and light sleep. They've found that deep sleep clears metabolic waste from the brain, a kind of nighttime cleansing that protects memory and cognitive health. REM sleep helps process emotion, organize learning, and enhance creativity. Even dreaming has purpose. It's the mind's way of making sense of our world, and perhaps most profound, the return to natural sleep cycles, what researchers now call segmented sleep, or biphasic sleep. Is being validated by science. Before artificial lighting, most humans experienced sleep in 2 segments. They would fall asleep a few hours after dusk, sleep for 3-4 hours, then naturally wake up for an hour or 2. In this quiet in-between state, called the watch, they would pray, reflect, make love, even write. Then they'd return to sleep until dawn. This wasn't insomnia. It was a deeply restful, biologically normal rhythm. Now, leading sleep researchers like Dr. Roger Eckerch have uncovered centuries of references to this sleep pattern in literature, historical records, and journals. What used to be dismissed as fragmented or broken sleep is now seen as a lost biological inheritance. In a way, the science we're rediscovering isn't new, it's a remembering. We're remembering that the blue light from screens tricks our brain into thinking it's daytime, blocking melatonin and delaying sleep. We're remembering that sleeping in total darkness helps regulate hormones, that cold, quiet rooms support deeper rest, that going to bed and waking at the same time each day rebuilds the body's natural rhythm. We're rediscovering what monks and mystics knew, that silence and stillness are essential, that true rest isn't just about sleep hours, it's about recovery, it's about allowing the nervous system to downshift, letting the mind wander and the spirit reflect. And for those who struggle with sleep today, science offers hope. Not just pills and sleep aids, but a return to ritual, to winding down without screens, to embracing a darkened room, to syncing with the sun, to treating sleep not as an afterthought, but as a daily act of self-respect. The most powerful shift we can make is not technological, it's philosophical. It's remembering that we are nature. We are not separate from its rhythms. The more we fight those rhythms, the more we suffer, but the more we align with them, the more energy, clarity, and purpose we reclaim. So yes, we forgot, but now, slowly, steadily, we are remembering. The science of sleep, once dismissed, is now becoming one of the most urgent frontiers of modern health, because in rediscovering the forgotten science of sleep, we rediscover something else too, our humanity. In an age where comfort is sold as the highest goal, where fast delivery, soft beds, and endless convenience are glorified, it's easy to forget a vital truth that once guided generations before us: duty is greater than comfort. Before electricity illuminated our nights and silenced the stars, people lived closer to the raw edge of life. Their survival depended on responsibility, not relaxation. Whether tending fires through bitter winters, rising before dawn to milk cows, or standing guard against threats in the night, they knew life required sacrifice, and with that sacrifice came something deeper: meaning. The villagers who slept in shifts didn't do it because it was easy. They did it because someone had to keep watch. Someone had to make sure the bread was rising, the infant wasn't coughing, the fire didn't die out. In those days, every member of the family, no matter how small, had a role. Sleep came when duty allowed it, not the other way around. This might sound harsh to modern ears, but there's a strength in that kind of living, a sense of purpose that many today quietly crave. We've engineered our world for ease, but in doing so, we've often removed the very challenges that gave our ancestors character. Today, we complain if the Wi-Fi lags or the air conditioner breaks down. But these were not problems for the people of the past. Their worries were real, and so their resilience was real. They didn't have time to be bored. They didn't have the luxury of staying up all night scrolling. Life had weight, and because of that, it had worth. Now we're beginning to see the cost of a comfort-first culture. Anxiety, burnout, disconnection. The more we chase convenience, the less we seem to be at peace. Why? Because human beings were not made to float in ease. We were made to carry weight. We were made to serve, build, protect, and sacrifice. These are the roles that make us fully alive. It's no coincidence that the happiest people, even today, are not the wealthiest or most comfortable, but those with responsibility: parents, soldiers, teachers, caregivers, volunteers, people who live not just for themselves, but for something greater. They get up when they don't feel like it. They stay up late to finish what matters. They sacrifice comfort for calling, and in that sacrifice they find joy, not the fleeting kind, but the kind that settles deep in the bones. Think of the mother who wakes every 2 hours to feed her newborn. She is exhausted, but she is fulfilled. Think of the nurse who works the night shift so her patients feel less alone. She is tired, but she is proud. Think of the firefighter who runs into danger when everyone else is running out. He is risking everything, but he is alive with purpose. These are not glamorous lives, but they are good lives, because they are built on duty. Even history remembers those who chose responsibility over rest. Harriet Tubman didn't sleep through the night when lives were on the line. Gandhi fasted and walked miles for justice. Mandela spent decades in a prison cell because he believed in duty to his people more than personal ease. Comfort may make you feel safe, but duty makes you significant. That is the deeper message of the forgotten sleep rhythms of the people who rose in darkness and served in silence. They weren't just following tradition. They were living out a principle that our generation desperately needs to remember. When you live for others, you become more than yourself. This isn't to glorify burnout or romanticize suffering. Rest matters. Boundaries matter, but what truly defines a life is not how much comfort it contains, but how much courage it chooses. A life of meaning isn't one of ease, it's one of impact. So ask yourself today, what am I living for? Who needs me to rise even when it's hard? What weight have I been avoiding that might actually give me strength? Because in choosing duty over comfort, we become more than consumers, we become contributors. And that's where legacy begins. In the quiet hours before dawn, while the world still sleeps, someone somewhere is keeping watch, not because it's easy, but because it's right. That someone could be you. In today's world, rest has become a lost art. We glorify hustle, we celebrate busyness, we scroll endlessly into the night, filling every silent gap with noise, stimulation, and distraction. But in doing so, we've abandoned something essential, not just for our bodies, but for our minds, our spirits, and our communities. There was a time, not too long ago, when rest wasn't a reward for productivity. It was part of life. It had rhythm, it had reverence, and it had roots in reality, not convenience. Before electricity, before smartphones, before artificial light stretched our days into oblivion, people lived by a natural tempo. Sunrise meant work, sunset meant winding down. The body wasn't pushed to its limits to prove its worth. It was listened to, honored, cared for. Today, we live in a society that calls tiredness weakness. We're told to grind now, sleep later, to keep pushing, keep going, don't stop, don't slow down, and if you dare take a break, you feel guilty for it. But this mindset is breaking us. Mental health is declining. Sleep disorders are rising. Burnout is becoming the norm, not the exception. And even in our moments of rest, we're not truly resting. We're still plugged in, still scrolling, still comparing, still consuming. So, what can we learn from the days before electricity when people didn't just sleep? They rested. We can learn that rest is not laziness. Rest is wisdom. It's the space where healing happens, where clarity returns. Where creativity is born, where faith is deepened. When the world gets quiet, the soul finally has a chance to speak. We can learn that true rest isn't about escape. It's about presence. It's not a luxury vacation once a year. It's the quiet walk after dinner. It's the bedtime ritual that signals to the body it's safe to let go. It's the stillness before sleep where the heart processes the day. These aren't small things, they're sacred. And they're missing. We can also learn that rest is communal. Before electricity, evenings were spent together around firelight, sharing stories, singing songs, or simply sitting in silence. Families weren't scattered in separate rooms with separate screens. They were united by darkness, and in that darkness they found connection. Today, many of us are more connected than ever, yet more lonely than ever. Reclaiming rest means reclaiming presence with people. But most importantly, we can learn that rest is resistance. In a world that tells you your value is measured by output, choosing to slow down is a radical act. Choosing to turn off the phone, to say no to one more thing. To sleep when you're tired, to not answer that email at midnight, to be still, to breathe, that's not weakness, that's strength, because you cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot lead if your spirit is exhausted. You cannot love well if your heart is worn thin. Rest is not the opposite of responsibility, it's what fuels it. The farmers of the past knew this, the shepherds, the blacksmiths, the mothers. They knew that a tired body couldn't sow good seed, that a weary heart couldn't raise strong children, that a foggy mind couldn't make wise decisions. They honored the rhythm of work and rest, not just because it felt good, but because it worked. It sustained them. And now we're seeing a return, a quiet revolution. People are beginning to seek what's been lost. They're turning off the noise, leaving the cities, moving to the countryside, deleting apps, practicing Sabbath. Prioritizing sleep, rebuilding bedtime rituals, reading books again, lighting candles instead of screens, choosing conversations over notifications. This is not nostalgia. This is wisdom rediscovered. We don't need to go back in time, but we do need to go back to truth. The truth that we are not machines. We are not made for 24/7 performance. We are not built for endless alerts and glowing lights and dopamine hits every 10 seconds. We are built for seasons, for cycles, for restoration. So here's the challenge. Put the phone down earlier. Embrace silence without fear. Let yourself sleep when the body asks. Create space in your day for nothing, and don't fill it. Talk to your family in person, light a candle, turn off the lamp, and remember, rest is not a break from life, it is part of life. Reclaiming rest isn't about becoming less productive, it's about becoming more human. Because in the end, the goal isn't just to stay awake longer, the goal is to live deeper.